Imagine standing on the rust-colored surface of Mars, your boots pressing into ancient dust that has waited billions of years for this moment. Above you, Earth hangs like a pale blue star in the salmon-pink sky, impossibly distant, impossibly small. You have achieved what generations before you could only dream of. You are the first, the pioneer, the bridge between two worlds. And yet, as you watch that distant point of light, a profound realization begins to settle into your bones, like the Martian cold seeping through your suit. You are never going home. Not because you don't want to, not because you've given up, but because the universe itself, with its immutable laws of physics, biology, and time, has already decided for you. Tonight, we will journey not just to Mars, but through the irreversible transformations that make return impossible. Across the darkness between worlds, where radio signals crawl at the speed of light and still take minutes to bridge the gap, humanity stands at the edge of its greatest paradox. We possess the technology to reach Mars. The rockets exist, the trajectories are mapped, the fuel calculations are precise. Getting there, while monumentally difficult, is within our grasp. But return, true return to Earth, reveals itself to be not merely challenging, but exponentially, perhaps impossibly, more complex. This is not a story of technological limitation alone. It is a story written in bone density and muscle fiber, in DNA helixes unwinding under cosmic radiation, in neural pathways that slowly, quietly, irrevocably rewire themselves for a gravity that is only 38% of what shaped human evolution. The journey to Mars takes approximately 7 months, depending on orbital alignment. 7 months of weightlessness, of cosmic rays piercing through spacecraft walls, of recycled air and rationed water. 7 months of Earth growing smaller in the rear cameras until it becomes indistinguishable from the stars around it. But those 7 months are merely the beginning. They are the easy part. Because once you arrive, once you step down onto that alien soil and feel the weak Martian gravity tugging at you with such gentle insistence, your body begins a transformation that cannot be undone. Your skeleton starts releasing calcium at an accelerated rate. Your heart, no longer fighting against Earth's pull, begins to atrophy. Your muscles, those faithful servants that carried you through Earth's gravity well, begin their slow surrender. And your DNA, bombarded by radiation levels 50 times higher than Earth's surface, begins accumulating damage that will echo through every cell division for the rest of your life. If you're watching this right now, wherever you are on our beautiful Earth, I'd love to know, where are you? What time is it where you're watching from? Leave a comment below. It reminds us all that right now, in this moment, we share this planet together, something future Martian colonists will only experience as a memory, a story, a dream of a world they can never truly return to. This is not science fiction. This is the quiet reality that space agencies, researchers, and mission planners understand but rarely discuss in public forums. The human body, sculpted over millions of years to thrive under one specific gravity, one specific atmospheric pressure, one specific radiation environment, cannot simply toggle between worlds like changing channels. The transformations that occur are profound, systematic, and in many cases, permanent. Your cardiovascular system adapts to Martian conditions. Your vestibular system, the delicate instrument in your inner ear that gives you balance, recalibrates itself to a new gravitational constant. Your very brain structure shifts, with cerebrospinal fluid redistributing itself, optic nerves swelling, and spatial reasoning centers rewiring their fundamental assumptions about up, down, and movement through space. Tonight, we will explore each threshold you cross, each biological point of no return, the bone loss that accelerates beyond recovery, the heart that forgets how to pump against Earth's crushing gravity, the DNA damage that accumulates like sand in an hourglass, counting down to consequences we're only beginning to understand. We will examine not just the physical impossibilities, but the psychological transformations, the economic realities, and the profound philosophical question at the heart of Mars colonization. What does it mean to be human when you can never return to humanity's home? The journey begins not with a rocket launch, but with understanding. So settle in, let your curiosity awaken, and let us explore together why anyone heading to Mars will never make it back home. Before we even consider the biological transformation awaiting those who venture to Mars, we must confront a far more immediate problem, one written not in bone density or radiation exposure, but in the cold, unforgiving mathematics of physics itself. The brutal truth is this: getting to Mars is extraordinarily difficult. Getting back may be impossible. The challenge begins with a single devastating variable: fuel. On Earth, when we launch spacecraft, we are surrounded by infrastructure built over decades. Launch pads, refineries, supply chains, entire economies dedicated to the construction and fueling of rockets. Mars offers none of this. When the first human missions arrive on the Martian surface, they will land on a world without fuel stations, without factories, without the intricate web of technology that makes spaceflight possible. Every ounce of propellant needed to leave Mars must either be carried from Earth or manufactured on site using resources that barely exist in accessible form. This is not a minor inconvenience, it is a mathematical prison. To understand why, we must revisit the tyranny of the rocket equation, a principle so fundamental it has defined space exploration since its inception. The equation is deceptively simple. To carry more fuel, you need a bigger rocket, but a bigger rocket weighs more, which requires even more fuel to lift. This creates an exponential spiral where the mass of fuel needed grows far faster than the payload it carries. For a journey to Mars and back, this spiral becomes nearly insurmountable. Consider the Apollo missions, humanity's greatest achievement in space travel. The Saturn V rocket that carried astronauts to the moon stood 363 feet tall and weighed 6.2 million pounds at launch. Of that staggering mass, only a tiny command module weighing 12,000 pounds returned to Earth. The fuel-to-payload ratio was astronomical, and the Moon is our closest neighbour, a mere 240,000 miles away. Mars, at its nearest approach, is 140 times farther. The physics do not scale linearly, they scale exponentially. And here lies the first brutal truth. Earth's escape velocity is 25,000 miles per hour. Mars, with its weaker gravity, has an escape velocity of only 11,000 miles per hour. This sounds promising, almost inviting. Leaving Mars should be easier, shouldn't it? But this assumption crumbles under scrutiny. The ease of leaving Mars is meaningless if you have no fuel to power the departure. And manufacturing or transporting that fuel requires overcoming Earth's gravity first. Carrying enough propellant across 140 million miles of void to refuel a rocket that doesn't yet exist on Martian soil. The numbers are staggering. A single Starship-class vehicle, the kind SpaceX envisions for Mars colonization, requires approximately 1,200 tons of propellant to leave Mars and return to Earth. That is 2.4 million pounds of liquid methane and liquid oxygen. To carry that much fuel from Earth would require multiple launches, each one fighting against Earth's gravity, each one adding layers of complexity, cost and risk. It is a logistical nightmare wrapped in a physics equation that offers no mercy. This is why in situ resource utilization, or ISRU, has become the centerpiece of every Mars return strategy. The idea is elegant. Use Martian resources to create fuel on site. Mars has carbon dioxide in its atmosphere and water ice beneath its surface. Through a process called the Sabatier reaction, carbon dioxide and hydrogen can be combined to produce methane and oxygen, the exact propellants needed for modern rockets. In theory, a small chemical plant landed on Mars could transform the planet's raw materials into rocket fuel, eliminating the need to carry it from Earth. In theory. But ISRU remains largely theoretical. No system capable of producing 1,200 tons of rocket fuel has ever been tested on Mars. The technology exists in laboratories, in small-scale experiments, in carefully controlled environments on Earth. But Mars is not a laboratory. It is a world of dust. Storms that can engulf the entire planet, of temperatures that plunge to minus 125 degrees Fahrenheit, of radiation that bombards the surface without mercy. Building and maintaining a fuel production facility in such an environment, remotely and autonomously, is an engineering challenge that has never been solved. Even if ISRU succeeds, time becomes the enemy. Producing 1,200 tons of fuel does not happen overnight. It could take months, possibly years, depending on the efficiency of the equipment and the availability of resources. And Mars does not wait for human schedules. The planets move according to celestial mechanics, far older than our ambitions. This brings us to the launch window problem, a constraint as rigid as the rocket equation itself. Earth and Mars orbit the Sun at different speeds, and they align favorably for travel only once every 26 months. Miss that window, and you wait over 2 years for the next opportunity. This means that any return mission must be planned with surgical precision, accounting not just for fuel production timelines, but for the psychological and biological toll of waiting on an alien world while your body transforms into something that may no longer be capable of surviving Earth's gravity. SpaceX's Starship strategy acknowledges these challenges, but relies on assumptions that remain unproven. Their plan involves launching multiple Starships into Earth orbit, refueling them in space, then sending them to Mars with enough propellant to either return directly or support ISRU efforts. It is an audacious vision, but it hinges on orbital refueling technology that is still in development and on Mars fuel production systems that do not yet exist. One failure in this chain, one miscalculation, one piece of equipment that breaks in the Martian cold, and the return journey vanishes. The Moon offers a stark comparison. Apollo astronauts spent days on the lunar surface, then launched using a small ascent module that had been carried with them. The entire return vehicle was pre-positioned, fueled, and ready. Mars missions cannot afford this luxury. The distances are too vast, the fuel requirements too immense, the launch windows too narrow. This is the brutal physics of getting back. It is not a question of courage or determination. It is a question of mass, energy, and time, variables governed by laws written into the fabric of the universe itself. Every kilogram matters. Every joule of energy counts. And every month spent waiting on Mars is another month your body adapts to a gravity, well, it may never escape. The rocket that could bring you home must be built on a world that has never built rockets, fueled by resources that must be mined and processed by machines that have never operated in such conditions, launched during a narrow window that opens only once every 2 years. These are not challenges to be overcome with ingenuity alone. They are physical realities, mathematical certainties, cosmic constraints that do not negotiate. And they form the first, most fundamental barrier to any dream of return. Before your bones weaken, before radiation rewrites your cells, before your heart forgets how to pump against Earth's gravity, the physics of departure has already made your return nearly impossible. The journey to Mars is not a round trip. It is a one-way descent into a gravity well we have not yet learned to climb out of. The journey to Mars is not merely measured in distance or duration. It is measured in transformation. From the moment your spacecraft enters Mars' gravitational field, your body begins a silent, irreversible metamorphosis. While your mind celebrates the historic landing, while your eyes drink in the rust-colored horizon, your skeleton has already begun its betrayal. Mars pulls at you with only 38% of Earth's gravitational force. To stand on the Martian surface is to feel impossibly light, as though you've shed decades of weight in an instant. Your first steps are effortless, almost dreamlike. You can leap higher, move with unprecedented ease. It feels like liberation. But this lightness is an illusion. What you're experiencing is not freedom. It is the beginning of your body's slow dissolution. Within weeks, not months or years, but weeks, your bones begin to forget what it means to hold you upright against the pull of a full planetary mass. On Earth, every moment of your existence is an act of resistance. Standing, walking, simply sitting in a chair. These mundane actions constantly stress your skeletal system, and in response, your bones rebuild themselves, maintaining their density and strength. This is the invisible bargain your body makes with gravity. Pressure in exchange for structural integrity. On Mars, that bargain is broken. In the reduced gravity, your bones no longer receive the signals they need to maintain themselves. The osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building new bone tissue, slow their work dramatically. Meanwhile, the osteoclasts, the cells that break down old bone, continue at their relentless pace, perhaps even accelerate. The balance tips. Destruction outpaces creation. Calcium, the fundamental mineral that gives bones their hardness, begins leaching from your skeleton at an alarming rate, dissolving into your bloodstream like salt in water. Research from astronauts aboard the International Space Station, where microgravity is even more extreme than Mars' low gravity, reveals the brutal mathematics of bone loss. Astronauts lose between 1% and 2% of their bone mass every single month in space. In 6 months, that's 12% of their skeletal structure simply gone, scattered into the void of their own bodies. On Mars, the loss may be somewhat slower due to the planet's partial gravity, but it is no less inevitable. Current estimates suggest bone density loss of 0.5% to 1% per month, a rate that compounds into catastrophic consequences over years. Let us imagine you are among the first colonists, committed to staying on Mars for 3 years, the minimum duration for a realistic surface mission given orbital mechanics and return windows. In that time, you could lose anywhere from 18% to 36% of your bone density. Your spine begins to compress. Your femurs, once strong enough to carry you through a lifetime of walking, running, and climbing, become as fragile as chalk. Your hips, the architecture that allowed your ancestors to walk upright across the African savanna, deteriorate into something barely recognizable. There exists a point of no return. Though scientists debate its exact location, the consensus is forming around a threshold of 2 to 3 years in Martian gravity. Beyond this point, your skeleton may become so compromised that returning to Earth becomes not just difficult, but physiologically impossible. Your bones would quite literally shatter under the weight of their own planet. Consider what this means in practical terms. After 3 years on Mars, you board a return spacecraft. The journey home takes 6 to 9 months. During this time, you're in zero gravity, and the bone loss accelerates even further. You've now been away from Earth's full gravitational embrace for nearly 4 years. Your skeleton is a shadow of what it was. And then, the moment of truth arrives. Your capsule enters Earth's atmosphere. The parachutes deploy. You land. Suddenly, you weigh what you did before you left, but your bones do not. The calcium that once resided in your skeleton hasn't disappeared. It has flooded your bloodstream, and your kidneys have been working overtime to filter it out. During your return journey, this excess calcium crystallizes, forming kidney stones of excruciating proportions. Some astronauts report stones so large they require surgical intervention. The pain is described as unbearable, a searing agony that radiates through the lower back and abdomen. And this is merely a prelude to what awaits upon landing. When you attempt to stand on Earth for the first time, the weight is crushing. Your spine, compressed by months of bone loss, strains under loads it once carried effortlessly. Each step risks a fracture. Your hips might fail entirely, the femoral neck snapping like a twig under forces it evolved to withstand but can no longer manage. Real case studies from astronauts returning from 6-month missions aboard the ISS paint a sobering picture. Some require wheelchairs for weeks. Others experience stress fractures simply from walking. One astronaut reported that standing in the shower felt like being crushed by an invisible force, the water itself seeming to weigh tons. Exercise protocols and calcium supplements can slow this deterioration, but they cannot stop it. Astronauts on the ISS exercise for 2.5 hours every single day, using resistance machines designed to simulate the loads their bones would experience on Earth. They consume carefully calibrated diets, rich in calcium and vitamin D. Yet despite these interventions, they still lose bone mass. The truth is inescapable. Without true gravitational loading, without the constant rhythmic stress of walking on a full gravity world, bones simply cannot maintain themselves. On Mars, you would exercise. You would follow protocols. You would do everything possible to preserve your skeletal integrity. But Mars's gravity is not enough. It is too light to trigger the biological responses your bones need. You are caught in a gravitational limbo, too heavy for your body to recognize as weightlessness, too light for it to recognize as Earth. Your skeleton enters a state of confusion, unable to adapt to either condition fully, slowly deteriorating as it searches for equilibrium that will never come. The implications become even more profound when we consider the next generation. Imagine a child born on Mars. Their bones develop under the gentle pull of 0.38 g, forming a skeleton optimized for Martian conditions. They grow tall and slender, their bones less dense but sufficient for the world they inhabit. They learn to walk with the characteristic bounding gait that Mars demands. They've never known anything else. This child could never come to Earth. Their skeleton, forged in the light gravity of Mars, would collapse under Earth's pull. The forces required simply to sit upright would be overwhelming. Standing would be impossible. Their spine would compress catastrophically. Their legs, never stressed by full planetary gravity, would buckle immediately. This child is not just a Martian by birth. They are Martian by irreversible biology. Earth, the cradle of humanity, would be as alien and hostile to them as the surface of Jupiter. This is not science fiction. This is straightforward physiology extrapolated from everything we know about how bones respond to gravitational stress. Every long-duration astronaut we've studied has returned with compromised skeletal integrity. Every single one. Some recover most of their bone density over months or years. But recovery is never complete. Bone lost in space is bone partially lost forever. Microscopic changes in bone architecture persist, creating weaknesses that remain for the rest of the astronaut's life. On Mars, the timeline is simply extended. The losses accumulate. The point of no return approaches not suddenly, but gradually, like a tide that rises so slowly you don't notice until the water is over your head. One day, you wake up on Mars, and you realize that the journey home is no longer a choice. It is a fantasy. Your bones have adapted. They have become Martian. And Mars, with its thin atmosphere, its dust storms, its frigid nights and radiation-soaked days, has become your permanent home. This is the skeleton's irreversible transformation. A process that begins with your first step on Martian soil and concludes with the quiet recognition that Earth's gravity, once your constant companion, has become your mortal enemy. Your bones will betray you, not through weakness or failure, but through adaptation. They will become perfectly suited to a world that is not your own, and in doing so, they will ensure you can never return to the one that is. The human skeleton, that magnificent architecture of calcium and collagen that allowed our species to stand upright and reach for the stars, becomes the very prison that keeps us bound to the red planet. This is not a journey with a return ticket. This is a one-way transformation, written not in rocket fuel or orbital mechanics, but in the silent language of bone cells, reshaping themselves cell by cell, day by day, until the person who arrived on Mars and the person who remains are separated not by distance, but by biology itself. Months into the Mars mission, something profound begins to happen inside your chest, something silent, invisible, and irreversible. Your heart, that tireless muscle that has beaten billions of times since before you were born, begins to forget what Earth felt like. It begins to adapt, and in adapting, it begins to fail you. The cardiovascular system is not merely a pump and a series of tubes. It is an orchestra of pressure, flow, and rhythm calibrated over millions of years to the exact gravitational pull of Earth. On Mars, where gravity is only 38% of what it is at home, this ancient calibration begins to unravel. The heart does not resist this change. It surrenders to it. And in that surrender lies a transformation so complete that returning to Earth may become not just difficult, but fatal. Within the first weeks on Mars, your cardiovascular system begins its remodeling. On Earth, your heart works constantly against gravity to pump blood upward from your legs to your brain. Every time you stand, your heart compensates, your blood vessels constrict, Your body orchestrates an invisible symphony to keep you conscious and upright. But on Mars, that symphony is no longer necessary. Gravity's grip has weakened. Blood flows more easily. The heart no longer needs to work as hard. And so, like any muscle that is no longer challenged, it begins to atrophy. The heart physically shrinks. Studies of astronauts returning from the International Space Station reveal that cardiac muscle mass can decrease by as much as 20% during prolonged exposure to reduced gravity. The left ventricle, the powerhouse chamber responsible for pumping oxygenated blood throughout the body, becomes smaller, weaker, less efficient. On Mars, this is not a problem. On Mars, a smaller heart is perfectly adequate. But Earth does not care what works on Mars. Earth demands the heart you once had. And that heart no longer exists. As the months stretch into years, the transformation deepens. Your body, in its infinite wisdom, recognizes that it is carrying more blood than it needs. On Earth, you require approximately 5 liters of blood to sustain yourself, to fill your vessels, to maintain pressure against gravity's constant pull. But on Mars, with its gentler gravity, your body decides this is wasteful. Blood volume begins to decrease, dropping by 15 to 20% over the course of extended habitation. Your kidneys excrete excess fluid. Your bone marrow produces fewer red blood cells. Your cardiovascular system becomes leaner, more efficient for Mars, catastrophically insufficient for Earth. This is not a temporary adjustment. This is remodeling at the cellular level. Your blood vessels themselves begin to change. The smooth muscle cells lining your arteries and veins, which on Earth maintain tension to regulate blood flow against gravity, begin to relax. They lose their tone, their responsiveness, their ability to constrict rapidly when needed. The autonomic nervous system, which on Earth constantly monitors and adjusts cardiovascular function to keep you standing upright, begins to recalibrate. It learns new set points, new thresholds, new expectations. It becomes Martian. The danger of this transformation reveals itself most dramatically in a condition known as orthostatic intolerance. On Earth, when you stand up, gravity immediately pulls blood downward into your legs. Within milliseconds, your body responds. Your heart rate increases. Your blood vessels constrict. Blood pressure rises in your upper body to ensure your brain receives adequate oxygen. You remain conscious. You remain standing. This happens automatically, thousands of times a day, without thought, without effort. It is one of the most fundamental adaptations that allows us to exist as upright beings. But after years on Mars, this system fails. Astronauts returning from even short stays in microgravity experience profound orthostatic intolerance. They cannot stand without their vision tunneling, their hearts racing, their bodies collapsing. Blood pools in their legs. Their weakened hearts cannot generate sufficient pressure to fight Earth's gravity. Their blood vessels, having lost their tone, cannot constrict quickly enough. Within seconds of standing, they faint, not from exhaustion or weakness of will, but from the simple mechanical reality that their cardiovascular system no longer recognizes Earth as home. Current data from astronauts aboard the International Space Station, who experience similar but less severe effects, show that orthostatic intolerance worsens with mission duration. After 6 months in space, astronauts require weeks of intensive rehabilitation simply to walk without assistance. After a year, the recovery period extends to months. But these astronauts have spent their time in microgravity, not on Mars. The Martian gravity, while present, may be just enough to deceive the body into thinking it has adapted successfully, while still being far too weak to prepare it for Earth's demands. The cruelest trap is not the absence of gravity, but the presence of just enough to make the body forget what true gravity requires. Blood pressure, regulation, that delicate dance of expansion and contraction that keeps us alive moment to moment, becomes permanently altered. On Mars, your resting blood pressure slowly decreases as your body adapts to the reduced workload. The baroreceptors, specialized sensors in your arteries that detect pressure changes and trigger compensatory responses, reset themselves to Martian norms. They become less sensitive, less reactive. Your body no longer perceives low blood pressure as an emergency because on Mars, it is not. But on Earth, this dulled response system becomes a critical vulnerability. When you need your blood pressure to rise quickly, when you need your vessels to constrict in an instant, the system hesitates. It responds sluggishly. It fails to protect you. The return journey itself presents dangers that transcend those faced during the initial voyage to Mars. As your spacecraft accelerates toward Earth, as you eventually enter the atmosphere and experience the crushing force of re-entry, your cardiovascular system will be tested beyond its adapted capabilities. G-forces during re-entry can reach 3 to 4 times Earth's gravity. For a heart that has spent years adapted to 38% of Earth gravity, this is not merely stressful, it is catastrophic. During re-entry, blood is forced away from the brain with tremendous pressure. A healthy, Earth-adapted cardiovascular system can compensate, can maintain consciousness, can survive. But a Martian-adapted system, with its smaller heart, reduced blood volume, and weakened vascular tone, may simply fail. Pilots and astronauts train extensively to prevent G-lock, gravity-induced loss of consciousness, using specialized breathing techniques and pressure suits. But no amount of training can compensate for a heart that has physically shrunk, for blood vessels that have lost their ability to constrict, for a body that has fundamentally forgotten how to function under Earth's gravity. The risk of stroke during or immediately after return becomes alarmingly real. Stroke occurs when blood flow to the brain is interrupted, either by a blockage or by inadequate pressure. With reduced blood volume, weakened cardiac output, and impaired vascular response, the returning Mars colonist faces a perfect storm of stroke risk factors. The brain, oxygen-starved during the critical moments of re-entry or the first attempts to stand on Earth, may suffer permanent damage or fail entirely. What began as adaptation becomes annihilation. Cardiac events, heart attacks, arrhythmias, these risks multiply exponentially. The heart muscle, atrophied and deconditioned, is suddenly asked to perform work it has not done in years. Imagine an athlete who has trained only for walking suddenly forced to run a marathon. The heart, quite simply, may not be capable of meeting Earth's demands. Electrical conduction through cardiac tissue, which depends on precise cellular architecture, may be disrupted by the physical remodeling that occurred on Mars. The heart may beat irregularly, inefficiently, or in some cases, stop entirely. The cruel mathematics of cardiovascular adaptation suggests that there exists a point of no return, a threshold beyond which the changes become irreversible. Current estimates, based on data from space station missions and prolonged bed rest studies, suggest that this threshold may be somewhere between 18 and 36 months. Spend a year on Mars, and perhaps with intensive rehabilitation, your cardiovascular system can remember Earth. Spend 3 years, and you may be Martian forever. Spend 5 years, the minimum realistic duration for a Mars mission including travel time, and your heart will have forgotten entirely how to beat for Earth. This is not a problem that can be solved with exercise. Astronauts on the International Space Station exercise 2 hours daily, using specialized equipment designed to simulate gravity's effects. Despite this, they still experience significant cardiovascular deconditioning. On Mars, even with similar exercise regimens, the constant background of reduced gravity continues its inexorable work. Every moment spent on Mars, whether working, sleeping, or exercising, is a moment spent retraining your cardiovascular system to accept Martian gravity as normal. And once that retraining is complete, once your body has fully committed to its new reality, the path back to Earth becomes not just difficult, but potentially fatal. The heart does not betray you intentionally. It simply does what hearts do. It adapts. It optimizes. It becomes exactly what it needs to be for the environment it inhabits. On Mars, it becomes Martian, and in becoming Martian, it forgets how to be anything else. This is the quiet tragedy of cardiovascular adaptation. Not that the system fails, but that it succeeds so completely at becoming alien that it can never again call Earth home. As we contemplate sending humans to Mars, we must confront this uncomfortable truth. The journey may be one way not because we lack the technology to return, but because the human body itself, in its remarkable ability to adapt, becomes the ultimate barrier to homecoming. Your heart, beating quietly in your chest, faithful and tireless, may be the very thing that traps you forever on a distant world. And it will do so not through failure, but through the perfect, irreversible success of adaptation. As we settle into the Martian landscape, the rusty horizon stretching endlessly before us, something invisible begins its silent work. We cannot see it. We cannot feel it. Yet with every breath we take beneath the salmon-colored sky, our bodies are being rewritten at the most fundamental level. This is not the gradual aging we experience on Earth. This is transformation, irreversible, cellular, complete. Mars has no magnetosphere. Earth's protective shield, generated by the churning liquid iron core of our home planet, deflects the torrent of cosmic radiation that screams through space at nearly the speed of light. On Earth, we live beneath an invisible umbrella that has sheltered life for billions of years. On Mars, that umbrella does not exist. The planet's core went cold eons ago, its magnetic field collapsed, and the surface was exposed to the full fury of the cosmos. Standing on Mars means standing naked before the universe's most penetrating forces. The radiation exposure on Mars is not merely higher than Earth. It is catastrophically, incomprehensibly higher. 700 times more intense than what we experience beneath Earth's atmosphere and magnetic cocoon. Every minute spent on the Martian surface is equivalent to receiving multiple chest X-rays. Every hour accumulates damage that would take months to receive on Earth. Every day etches permanent changes into the spiraling ladders of DNA that define who we are. This radiation arrives in 2 primary forms, each deadly in its own way. First, there are cosmic rays, high-energy particles accelerated by distant supernovas, black holes, and stellar explosions, traveling across the galaxy for millions of years before striking Mars. These particles are so energetic, they pass through spacecraft hulls, habitat walls, spacesuits, and human tissue as if they were barely there. When a cosmic ray strikes a DNA molecule, it doesn't just damage it, it shatters it. The double helix breaks apart, and while our cells possess remarkable repair mechanisms, they cannot fix everything. Some breaks heal incorrectly, creating mutations. Others never heal at all. Then there are solar particle events, massive eruptions from the sun that release billion-ton clouds of charged particles into space. On Earth, these events create beautiful auroras as particles collide harmlessly with our magnetosphere. On Mars, they arrive as invisible tsunamis of radiation, flooding the surface with doses that can be lethal in hours. During a major solar event, even the thickest habitat walls provide only partial protection. Astronauts must retreat to specially shielded storm shelters, huddled in the center of their base, waiting for the storm to pass. But even there, the radiation finds them. The cumulative effect is what transforms a temporary stay into a permanent exile. Cancer risk increases by approximately 5% for every year spent on Mars. 1 year equals a 5% increase. 2 years, 10%. 5 years on Mars means a 25% increase in lifetime cancer risk. But these are conservative estimates based on radiation exposure alone, not accounting for reduced gravity, isolation, or the countless other stressors that weaken the body's natural defenses. The real numbers may be far worse. Yet cancer is not the only threat, nor even the most insidious. Radiation damage extends far beyond the possibility of tumors. It reaches into the brain itself. The human brain, that 3-pound universe of electrical impulses and chemical signals, is exquisitely sensitive to cosmic radiation. Unlike other cells in the body, neurons do not regenerate easily. Damage to brain cells is often permanent. Studies on astronauts returning from long-duration missions aboard the International Space Station, where radiation exposure is only a fraction of what Mars delivers, have revealed troubling patterns: memory deficits, difficulty concentrating, slowed reaction times, and subtle personality changes. Now multiply that exposure by hundreds of times and extend it across years instead of months. Cosmic rays strike neurons directly, creating inflammation and oxidative stress. The brain's delicate networks begin to misfire. Short-term memory becomes unreliable. The ability to learn new tasks diminishes. Decision-making grows impaired, clouded by cognitive fatigue that no amount of rest can alleviate. Perhaps most disturbing are the behavioral changes: increased anxiety, depression, and difficulty regulating emotions. On Mars, surrounded by life-threatening challenges that demand perfect mental clarity, the very organ needed to ensure survival begins to fail. These changes are not temporary. They do not reverse when radiation exposure ends. The brain on Mars becomes a different brain, one shaped by the relentless bombardment of particles that have traveled across the galaxy to rewrite the neural pathways that define thought itself. And then there is fertility, the most profound point of no return. Radiation does not discriminate between cells. It damages reproductive organs with the same merciless efficiency it damages everything else. For men, cosmic radiation decimates sperm production, reducing counts and increasing the likelihood of genetic mutations in whatever sperm remain. For women, the impact is even more severe. Eggs, unlike sperm, are not continuously produced. A woman is born with all the eggs she will ever have. Radiation damage to these irreplaceable cells is permanent. Each cosmic ray that strikes an ovarian cell increases the likelihood of infertility, miscarriage, or birth defects in any future children. Studies on animals exposed to radiation levels comparable to a Mars mission show stark results: sterility, failed pregnancies, and offspring with severe developmental abnormalities. The womb becomes hostile territory, unable to support the delicate process of creating new life. Even if conception occurs, radiation damage to DNA means that mutations will be passed to future generations. Children born to Martian colonists may carry genetic alterations never before seen in human history, alterations with consequences we cannot predict. This is not science fiction. This is biochemistry. The reproductive system, evolved over millions of years beneath Earth's protective shield, was never designed to function in an environment of constant high-energy bombardment. To spend years on Mars is to potentially surrender the ability to have healthy biological children. It is to accept that your genetic lineage may end with you, or if it continues, it will carry the scars of cosmic radiation forward into futures unknown. Some may argue that shielding can solve this problem. Indeed, modern spacecraft are equipped with layers of aluminum, polyethylene, and water tanks designed to absorb radiation. Yet the brutal truth is that adequate shielding for a multi-month return journey from Mars would require walls so thick and therefore so heavy that no rocket currently designed could lift the vehicle into space. The mass requirements are staggering. To reduce radiation exposure to safe levels would require shielding equivalent to several meters of solid material surrounding the entire crew compartment. Such a spacecraft would weigh thousands of tons, demanding fuel loads that dwarf anything humanity has ever launched. Even on Mars itself, habitat shielding provides only partial protection. Cosmic rays do not merely strike surfaces. They interact with the atoms they hit, creating secondary radiation showers, sprays of particles that can penetrate even deeper. In some cases, thick shielding can actually make radiation exposure worse by increasing these secondary particle cascades. Engineers call this the albedo effect, a cruel irony where adding more protection creates additional danger. There are proposals, burying habitats beneath Martian regolith, using the soil itself as shielding, living underground like moles, in tunnels lit by artificial light. But even meters of Martian dirt cannot stop the highest energy cosmic rays. They pass through mountains, they pass through planets. A few meters of dirt provides improvement, not immunity. The invisible point of no return is not a single moment. It is a threshold crossed gradually, cell by cell, mutation by mutation, across months and years. By the time a Mars colonist has lived on the red planet for 2 or 3 years, the damage is done. Their DNA has been fundamentally altered. Their brain has been changed. Their reproductive capacity compromised. The body that arrived on Mars is not the body that remains. To return to Earth at that point is to bring back a human transformed by radiation into something subtly, permanently different. Medical scans would reveal the scarring. Blood tests would show chromosomal abnormalities. Cognitive assessments would document the decline. Future doctors would monitor constantly for the cancers that radiation makes inevitable. And any children conceived would carry forward the genetic legacy of cosmic bombardment, mutations that might skip a generation, or might express themselves immediately in ways medicine has never encountered. This is the invisible prison, not the thin atmosphere or the weak gravity, but the unceasing radiation that rewrites biology itself. Every astronaut who sets foot on Mars crosses this threshold, knowing they may never be able to return, not just physically, but genetically whole. They become pioneers not just of a new world, but of a new human condition, one shaped by forces that have existed since the birth of the universe. The radiation on Mars is patient. It does not rush. It does not announce itself. It simply works, quietly, relentlessly, rewriting the code of life one broken strand at a time. And once the rewriting begins, there is no going back. The damage is permanent. The transformation is complete. We are no longer the humans who left Earth. We are something the cosmos has made us. And that change, invisible though it may be, is the truest point of no return. The human brain is not a fixed object. It is a living landscape, constantly reshaping itself in response to the world around it. Every sensation, every movement, every moment of balance or disorientation leaves its mark on the neural pathways that define how we perceive reality. On Earth, this process happens within the gentle embrace of familiar gravity, beneath skies that cycle predictably, surrounded by an atmosphere that has cradled our evolution for millions of years. But on Mars, everything changes. The gravity is different. The day is longer. The sensory input your brain receives becomes fundamentally alien. And after years in this environment, something profound and irreversible occurs. Your brain stops being an Earth brain. It becomes a Martian brain. And once that transformation is complete, returning home may not just be difficult. It may be neurologically impossible. The journey to understanding this begins with the vestibular system, the delicate apparatus in your inner ear that tells you which way is up. On Earth, this system has been calibrated by 1G of gravitational force since the moment you were born. Every time you stand, walk, or turn your head, tiny hair cells in fluid-filled canals detect the movement and send signals to your brain, allowing you to maintain balance without conscious thought. This system is so precise, so finely tuned, that it operates seamlessly, invisibly, every moment of your life. But on Mars, where gravity is only 38% of Earth's, these signals become distorted. The fluid in your inner ear moves differently. The hair cells send unfamiliar messages. Your brain receives contradictory information about your position in space. At first, this creates profound disorientation. Astronauts on the International Space Station report similar experiences in microgravity, a sensation called spatial disorientation, where up and down lose all meaning. But on Mars, something different happens. You are not floating. You are still standing, still walking, but everything feels wrong. Your steps are too light. Your movements too effortless. Your brain struggles to reconcile the visual information it receives with the gravitational signals it expects. For weeks, perhaps months, you stumble through a world that feels like a dream, where your body moves through space with a weightlessness that defies all prior experience. But then, slowly, imperceptibly, your brain begins to adapt. Neural pathways rewire themselves. The vestibular system recalibrates to the new gravitational constant. What once felt wrong gradually begins to feel normal. After a year on Mars, you no longer stumble. You move with confidence. Your brain, having constructed an entirely new internal map of how bodies move through space. This is neuroplasticity at work, the brain's remarkable ability to reshape itself in response to new environments. It is the same mechanism that allows stroke victims to relearn movement, that enables blind people to navigate by sound. On Mars, it allows you to function, to survive, to become a creature adapted to a new world. But here lies the trap. Once your vestibular system has recalibrated to Martian gravity, it cannot simply recalibrate back. Returning to Earth means subjecting your brain to another gravitational shock, one that may be even more severe than the initial adaptation. Your vestibular system, now tuned to 0, E8G, will be overwhelmed by Earth's 1G. The signals it sends to your brain will be too intense, too heavy, creating a sensation not just of disorientation, but of crushing weight. Some scientists believe that after several years on Mars, this recalibration may become permanent. Your brain may lose the flexibility to readjust. Earth, the world you were born on, becomes the alien environment. And Mars, the hostile planet you journeyed to, becomes home. The changes go deeper still. Brain imaging studies of astronauts who spend extended time in microgravity reveal something startling. The brain's physical structure changes. The cerebellum, responsible for motor control and balance, shows measurable alterations in volume and connectivity. The visual cortex adapts to new spatial relationships. Grey matter in certain regions decreases while other areas expand. These are not subtle changes. They are visible, quantifiable transformations captured in MRI scans. On Mars, similar changes would occur, but over a longer timescale and in response to different gravitational forces. After years of living under Martian gravity, your brain would not just think differently, it would literally be structured differently. Spatial orientation, the fundamental sense of where you are in three-dimensional space, becomes something entirely new. On Earth, your brain builds a cognitive map based on consistent gravitational cues. You know instinctively how far to reach, how hard to push, how much force is needed to lift an object. These calculations happen unconsciously, refined over a lifetime of experience. On Mars, every one of these calculations becomes obsolete. Objects fall more slowly. Distances feel deceptive. The arc of a thrown object follows an unfamiliar trajectory. At first, these differences are jarring, but over time, your brain learns the new physics of Martian space. It constructs new neural models, new intuitive understandings. You become fluent in the language of Martian movement, but this fluency comes at a cost. The old maps, the Earth maps, begin to fade. They are overwritten, replaced by Martian equivalents. And when those neural pathways are pruned away, they may not regenerate. Vision itself becomes compromised, not through injury, but through adaptation. In the reduced gravity of Mars, fluids in the body redistribute differently. Without the constant downward pull of Earth's gravity, cerebrospinal fluid shifts upward, increasing intracranial pressure. This pressure pushes against the back of the eyeball, flattening the optic nerve, distorting the shape of the lens. Astronauts on long-duration space missions have reported this condition, known as spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, or SANS. They return to Earth with vision problems that persist for months, sometimes years, sometimes permanently. On Mars, the reduced but still present gravity may slow this process, but it will not stop it. After several years, the structural changes to your eyes may become irreversible. The world you see will be forever altered, not just by distance, but by the physical reshaping of the organs through which you perceive it. Then there is time itself. Mars rotates on its axis once every 24 hours and 37 minutes, creating a day that is just slightly longer than Earth's. This difference seems trivial, less than an hour, barely noticeable. But the human circadian rhythm, the internal biological clock that regulates sleep, hormone production, and countless other physiological processes, is extraordinarily sensitive to light-dark cycles. On Earth, this rhythm is synchronized to a 24-hour day, reinforced by millennia of evolution. On Mars, this rhythm must shift. At first, the adjustment seems manageable. You wake a little later each day, sleep schedules drift. But over time, the cumulative effect becomes profound. Your circadian rhythm, no longer anchored to Earth time, begins to synchronize with Mars. Melatonin production shifts. Cortisol cycles adjust. Your entire endocrine system recalibrates to the Martian day. This is not merely a scheduling inconvenience. Circadian rhythm disruption is linked to depression, anxiety, cognitive decline, and a host of other mental health issues. Studies of shift workers and people living in extreme latitudes show that chronic circadian misalignment can have lasting effects on mood and mental function. On Mars, your circadian rhythm may eventually stabilize, but it will be a Martian rhythm, not an Earth one. Returning to Earth would mean forcing your brain to readjust yet again, to abandon the new cycle it has spent years establishing. For some, this may prove impossible. The internal clock may refuse to reset, leaving returnees in a perpetual state of jet lag, their bodies forever out of sync with the world they left behind. But perhaps the most profound change is not physical, but psychological. After years on Mars, something subtle happens in the way you think about home. At first, Mars is the alien place, the hostile environment you must endure. Earth is home, the blue marble you dream about, the world you long to return to. But as months turn into years, as your body adapts and your brain rewires, as you build routines and relationships in the Martian landscape, a cognitive shift occurs. Mars becomes familiar. Its rust-colored horizons become comforting. The thin atmosphere, the distant sun, the silence broken only by wind, these things become normal. Earth, meanwhile, becomes abstract, a memory, a place that exists in stories but no longer feels real. This is cognitive bias at work, the brain's tendency to normalize its current environment and distance itself from the unfamiliar. Psychologists call it the mere exposure effect, the phenomenon where we develop preference for things simply because they are familiar. On Mars, this effect becomes amplified by isolation. Cut off from Earth, surrounded only by the Martian landscape and a small crew of fellow travelers, your brain begins to attach emotional significance to your new environment. Mars becomes home not because it is welcoming, but because it is all you have. And when that emotional attachment solidifies, the thought of leaving becomes not just logistically difficult, but emotionally unbearable. The idea of returning to Earth, with its overwhelming gravity, its chaotic weather, its billions of people, begins to feel like exile rather than homecoming. Decision-making abilities themselves begin to decline. Isolation, confinement, and the constant low-level stress of living in a hostile environment take their toll on cognitive function. Studies of people in extreme isolation, from Antarctic research stations to submarine crews, show measurable declines in memory, attention, and executive function. On Mars, these effects would be magnified by the distance from Earth, the delayed communications, the knowledge that rescue is impossible. Your brain, deprived of the rich sensory stimulation of Earth, begins to slow down. Neurons prune connections that are no longer used. Cognitive flexibility decreases. The ability to adapt to new situations, to plan for complex future scenarios, begins to erode. This is not madness. It is adaptation. Your brain is conserving resources, focusing on the immediate tasks necessary for survival in a harsh environment. But it is also a narrowing, a loss of the broad cognitive capabilities that define human intelligence. After years on Mars, you may still be functional, still capable of performing routine tasks. But the version of you that could navigate the complexities of Earth life may no longer exist. The neural architecture required for that kind of adaptability may have been dismantled, repurposed, lost. In the silence of Mars, as dust devils spiral across ancient plains and the distant sun casts long shadows over barren rock, your brain completes its transformation. You are no longer an Earth creature temporarily visiting another world. You are something new, a hybrid consciousness shaped by two worlds but belonging fully to neither. The brain you carried from Earth has become a Martian brain, wired for lower gravity, synchronized to longer days, emotionally bonded to a landscape of rust and silence. And when the time comes to consider the journey home, your brain, that remarkable organ that has allowed you to survive and adapt, becomes the greatest barrier to return. Not because it has failed, but because it has succeeded too well. It has made you Martian. And once that transformation is complete, Earth is no longer home. It is simply another alien world, one that your rewired brain may never fully recognize again. After months on Mars, you notice something strange when reaching for a tool. Your hand moves too quickly, overshooting the target. You recalibrate, adjust, and try again. Within weeks, the correction becomes automatic. Your muscles have learned a new language, one spoken in the gravity of Mars, where everything weighs just 38% of what it did on Earth. This is not simply adaptation. This is transformation. Your body is becoming Martian, and with each passing day, the architecture of your muscles, the programming of your movements, and the very foundation of your physical being drift further from the world you left behind. Muscle memory is not merely a metaphor, it is a biological reality, encoded in the fibers of your tissue and the neural pathways that command them. On Earth, every step you take, every object you lift, every moment you stand upright is a constant negotiation with gravity. Your muscles have spent your entire life training for Earth's 1G environment. They are strong because they must be. They are coordinated because survival demanded it. But on Mars, where gravity pulls with barely more than a third of Earth's force, that strength becomes unnecessary. Your body, ever efficient, begins to dismantle what it no longer needs. The process begins within days. Fast-twitch muscle fibers, the explosive powerhouses responsible for quick movements and heavy lifting, are the first to go. These fibers require enormous energy to maintain, and in the reduced gravity of Mars, your body deems them expendable. Studies of astronauts in microgravity reveal that muscle mass can decline by up to 20% during a 6-month mission, even with rigorous daily exercise. On Mars, the decline is slower but relentless. Exercise protocols designed for space cannot fully replicate the constant gravitational load that Earth provides. You can run on a treadmill, lift resistance bands, perform squats until your legs burn, but you cannot simulate the simple, continuous burden of carrying your own weight through a day of Earth gravity. As the fast-twitch fibers atrophy, your remaining muscle tissue reorganizes itself. Slow-twitch fibers, designed for endurance rather than power, become dominant. Your movements grow smoother, more suited to the gentle pull of Mars, but less capable of the explosive force required on Earth. You become graceful in the Martian environment, but this grace comes at a cost. Your muscles are learning to speak a dialect that Earth no longer understands. Motor control follows muscle transformation. The cerebellum, the ancient part of your brain responsible for coordinating movement, begins to recalibrate. Every motion you make on Mars requires less effort, less correction, less force. Over time, your nervous system optimizes itself for this new reality. Picking up a rock that weighs 5 pounds on Mars means your brain calculates force, trajectory, and muscle engagement for 5 pounds, not the 13 pounds it would weigh on Earth. This recalibration is profound and largely unconscious. You do not choose to adapt. Your body simply does. After a year on Mars, your movements become fluid and effortless in the Martian gravity. You bound across the red soil with minimal exertion. You lift equipment with ease. But this efficiency is a trap. Each day of optimization for Mars is a day of de-optimization for Earth. Your motor cortex is rewriting its baseline assumptions about how bodies move through space. The neural pathways that once knew how to walk under Earth's gravity are being pruned, replaced by pathways that know only Mars. Then there is the immune system, that invisible guardian that has protected you since birth. On Mars, it begins to fail. The human immune system evolved in Earth's gravitational field, where fluid circulation, lymphatic drainage, and cellular communication all depend on the constant pull of 1G. In reduced gravity, these systems function differently. Immune cells do not circulate as efficiently. The production of white blood cells declines. Inflammation responses become dysregulated. Studies show that astronauts experience immune suppression during spaceflight, making them more susceptible to infections, slower to heal wounds, and less capable of mounting defenses against disease. On Mars, this immunosuppression becomes chronic. Unlike astronauts who return to Earth after months, Martian colonists remain in reduced gravity indefinitely. The immune system, sensing this permanent change, adjusts its resource allocation. Why maintain expensive immune responses for threats that seem diminished in the controlled environment of a habitat? The body, ever economical, begins to dismantle immune readiness. You may not notice at first. Perhaps a cut takes a few extra days to heal. Perhaps a minor infection lingers longer than expected. But over years, the decline accelerates. Your body is learning that Mars is safe, even when it is not. The metabolic changes are equally profound. On Earth, your body burns a baseline amount of energy simply to exist, to maintain temperature, to pump blood upward against gravity, to keep muscles ready for action. On Mars, these demands decrease. Your heart does not need to work as hard. Your muscles require less maintenance. Your metabolism slows, becoming more efficient for the Martian environment. This sounds beneficial, but it is a one-way street. A metabolism optimized for Mars is not prepared for the caloric and cardiovascular demands of Earth. Returning home would be like asking a hibernating bear to suddenly run a marathon. Wound healing, that miraculous process by which your body repairs itself, also deteriorates. Healing depends on robust circulation, efficient immune response, and the mechanical stress of gravity pulling fluids through tissue. On Mars, all three factors are compromised. Blood flow becomes sluggish in reduced gravity. Immune cells arrive late to injury sites. The natural compression of tissues under Earth's gravity, which aids in closing wounds and preventing fluid accumulation, is absent. A broken bone that might heal in 6 weeks on Earth could take 3 months on Mars. Surgical recovery times extend indefinitely. The body's ability to rebuild itself weakens with each passing year. Perhaps most troubling is the compounding effect. Each adaptation reinforces the others, creating a cascade of irreversible change. Weakened muscles place less stress on bones, accelerating skeletal deterioration. Reduced cardiovascular demand leads to a smaller, less powerful heart, which in turn circulates immune cells less effectively. A sluggish metabolism provides less energy for cellular repair, slowing wound healing and tissue regeneration. The nervous system, now calibrated for Martian movement, loses its ability to coordinate the forceful, precise motions required on Earth. Each system's adaptation to Mars makes the others more entrenched, until the entire body becomes a unified Martian organism, beautifully suited to the red planet, catastrophically unsuited to the blue one. The tragedy of muscle memory is that it feels like mastery. After years on Mars, you move with confidence and grace. You are strong in the Martian context, capable and adapted. But this strength is contextual, not absolute. Your body has not evolved to handle multiple gravitational environments. It can only be optimized for one. And with each passing month, that optimization becomes more complete, more irreversible, and more distant from Earth. Physical rehabilitation, theoretically possible in the early years, becomes progressively more difficult as time extends. The first colonists might return after 2 years and, with intensive therapy, regain much of their Earth functionality. But after 5 years, 10, the body's plasticity has limits. Neural pathways, once pruned, do not easily regrow. Muscle fibers, once lost, are difficult to rebuild, especially when the cardiovascular and metabolic systems can no longer support the demands of such rebuilding. Bones, thinned and brittle, fracture under the stress of rehabilitation. The immune system, weakened and complacent, struggles to fight the infections that accompany intense physical therapy. By the time a Martian colonist has spent a decade on the red planet, their body is no longer recognizably earthling. They are something new, something adapted, something that has crossed a biological threshold from which there is no return. The muscle memory Mars creates is not just a memory, it is an identity written into every fiber, every cell, every unconscious calculation of movement and force. In the quiet of the Martian night, as you rest in your habitat, you might flex your hand and marvel at how effortlessly it moves, how perfectly calibrated it has become to this alien world. What you may not realize is that this perfection is also a prison. Your body has learned Mars so well that it has forgotten Earth. And in that forgetting, you have crossed a line that no amount of exercise, no rehabilitation protocol, no force of will can uncross. You are no longer a visitor to Mars. You are Martian. And Earth, the world that made you, has become the alien place your body can no longer call home. After years on Mars, something unexpected happens. It is not the body alone that transforms. The mind, too, begins to drift from Earth, anchoring itself to a new world, a new rhythm, a new reality. What was once home becomes foreign. What was once alien becomes familiar. The astronauts who dream of returning to Earth may discover upon arrival that they have become strangers to their own planet, exiles not from Mars, but from the very world that gave them life. This is the psychological prison, not one built of walls or locked doors, but of perception itself. A prison where Earth, with all its beauty and history, becomes the alien world, and Mars, with all its dust and danger, becomes the only place that feels like home. Imagine stepping off the return spacecraft after years away. Your feet touch Earth's soil for the first time in half a decade or more. The gravity pulls at you with crushing weight, each step a burden your muscles can barely remember how to bear. But it is not the physical sensation that overwhelms you. It is everything else: the noise, the chaos, the sheer overwhelming presence of 8 billion human beings, living, breathing, moving, talking all at once. On Mars, your community numbered perhaps a dozen, maybe 100 at most. Every face was known, every voice familiar. Silence was the natural state of existence, broken only by the hum of life support systems and the occasional crackle of communication equipment. Time moved slowly, deliberately. Every action was measured, every decision calculated. Life was simple in its complexity, focused in its purpose. Earth offers no such clarity. Cities roar with traffic. Crowds surge through streets like living rivers. Advertisements flash from every surface. Conversations overlap in a cacophony of meaningless noise. The sky itself teems with birds, insects, aircraft, the constant movement of a living atmosphere that never rests. For someone who has spent years in the red silence of Mars, Earth becomes sensory overload, an assault on the senses that cannot be escaped. This is reverse culture shock, but magnified beyond anything experienced by travelers returning from foreign countries. This is not adjustment. This is alienation. The psyche that adapted so carefully to Mars now recoils from Earth, unable to process the complexity, the density, the relentless stimulation of a world that once felt normal. What was home becomes hostile. What was familiar becomes frightening. The astronauts who venture to Mars will experience the overview effect, that profound shift in perspective that occurs when viewing Earth from space. Astronauts describe it as a moment of transcendence, seeing our blue planet suspended in the void, understanding viscerally that all of humanity shares this single fragile home. But for those who spend years on Mars, something different happens. The overview effect reverses. Earth becomes distant, abstract, a memory rather than a reality. Mars fills the window instead. Its red valleys, its towering volcanoes, its pink sky at sunset. These become the landmarks of daily life. Mars stops being the alien world. Earth takes its place. Consider the rhythm of Martian life. Days measured by sols, not hours. Seasons lasting twice as long as Earth's. Dust storms that darken the sky for months. Every sunrise witnessed through reinforced glass. Every breath taken from recycled air. Every drop of water accounted for, rationed, precious. This becomes normal. The mind adapts not just to survive, but to thrive. New neural pathways form, new habits crystallize, new expectations settle into the subconscious. When the Martian colonist returns to Earth, they find themselves disoriented by abundance. Rain falls from the sky, water literally falling from above, unfiltered, uncontrolled, wasted. Rivers flow to the ocean carrying millions of gallons that no one collects, no one rations. The concept becomes almost offensive, a reminder of Earth's careless wealth. The returnee finds themselves calculating water usage even when there is no need, unable to shake the conservation mindset that kept them alive on Mars. Social isolation creates permanent psychological changes that extend far beyond simple loneliness. On Mars, the colonist lives in a small, tightly bonded community where every member is essential, where survival depends on trust and cooperation. Relationships deepen in ways impossible in the vast anonymity of Earth. Every conversation matters. Every person is irreplaceable. The social fabric becomes dense, interconnected, profound. Returning to Earth means entering a world where people are expendable, where relationships are casual, where faces blur into crowds. The depth of connection experienced on Mars cannot be replicated in Earth's shallow social landscape. The returnee finds themselves unable to form new bonds, unable to engage with the superficial pleasantries that pass for friendship. They search for the intensity they left behind and find only emptiness. Earth's population numbers in billions, yet the colonist has never felt more alone. Studies of long-duration astronauts reveal troubling patterns. Depression rates among those returning from extended missions exceed 40%. Anxiety, insomnia, and social withdrawal become common. Some astronauts report feeling as though they left part of themselves in space, unable to fully reintegrate with Earth's society. For Mars colonists, these effects would be exponentially worse. They have not spent months in orbit. They have spent years on another planet, living under different gravity, different light, different rules. They have not merely visited space. They have become inhabitants of another world. Post-traumatic stress disorder emerges not from a single traumatic event, but from the accumulated stress of daily survival on Mars. Every day brings danger. Equipment failures, radiation exposure, dust infiltration, medical emergencies with no possibility of evacuation. The mind remains in constant vigilance, stress hormones elevated, fight or flight responses primed. Even small tasks carry life or death consequences. A forgotten seal, a miscalculated trajectory, a delayed repair. Any mistake could mean the end. This hypervigilance cannot simply switch off upon returning to Earth. The colonist finds themselves scanning for threats that do not exist, checking systems that are not there, unable to relax in an environment their brain perceives as dangerously uncontrolled. Earth's casual attitude towards safety becomes unbearable. People walk outside without pressure suits. They breathe unfiltered air. They trust that the atmosphere will not kill them. To the Martian returnee, this seems like reckless insanity. But perhaps the most profound change is not psychological adaptation, but identity transformation. After years on Mars, colonists no longer identify as Earthlings visiting another world. They become Martians. This is not metaphor. This is a fundamental shift in how they perceive themselves, their place in the universe, their relationship to home. Mars is no longer the mission. Mars is home. Earth becomes the foreign planet, the place their ancestors came from, a world as distant and irrelevant as any historical homeland is to immigrants generations removed. This new identity crystallizes through shared experience. The first dust storms survived together, the first successful harvest grown in Martian soil, the first child born under Martian gravity. These become the founding myths of a new culture, stories that bind the community together and separate them irrevocably from Earth. The colonists develop their own language patterns, their own humor, their own values shaped by Martian necessity. They are no longer Americans or Chinese or Europeans who happen to be on Mars. They are Martians who happen to have been born on Earth. Returning to Earth means abandoning this identity. It means becoming an outsider in both worlds, belonging fully to neither. The psychological cost of this abandonment may be too high to bear. Many colonists, faced with the prospect of return, may find themselves unable to leave, not because of physical limitations, but because leaving Mars would mean destroying the person they have become. This explains why some colonists might psychologically sabotage their own return journey. It is not that they want to die on Mars. It is that they cannot imagine living anywhere else. Missed deadlines for return preparations, equipment that mysteriously malfunctions, medical conditions that suddenly worsen. These may not be accidents, but unconscious expressions of a mind that has made its choice, that has committed to Mars so completely that even the possibility of return becomes a threat to psychological survival. The human mind is not designed to inhabit two worlds simultaneously. We anchor ourselves to place, to community, to identity. For the Mars colonist, these anchors have been pulled from Earth and driven deep into red soil. To return is not to go home. To return is to become homeless, adrift between worlds, belonging to neither. As we consider the journey to Mars, we must acknowledge this truth. The greatest barrier to return may not be rockets or radiation or bone density. It may be the simple fact that after years on Mars, the colonists will not want to come back. Earth will have become the alien world, and Mars, despite all its hostility and danger, will have become the only place in the universe that still feels like home. This is the psychological prison from which there is no escape. Not because the door is locked, but because the prisoner has forgotten that the door exists at all. Beyond the biological transformations, beyond the radiation damage and bone loss, there exists another prison, one built not of flesh and physics, but of mathematics and money. As we drift through the cold economics of interplanetary travel, we encounter a truth as harsh as the Martian winter. The cost of bringing you home is measured not just in fuel and time, but in the value of human life itself. And in that calculation, the numbers tell a story no one wants to hear. Your return ticket was never purchased because in the end, no one will pay for it. The financial reality of Mars colonization is stark and unforgiving. A one-way mission to Mars, with all its complexity, costs between $6 and $10 billion per person when accounting for spacecraft development, life support, and cargo. It is already one of the most expensive endeavors humanity has ever contemplated. But a return mission, the costs multiply in ways that defy justification. Returning a single human from Mars requires 3 to 4 times the resources of sending them there. We are not talking about mere addition, but exponential escalation. Why? Because physics demands a price. To escape Mars's gravity, even though it is only 38% of Earth's, requires massive amounts of fuel. That fuel must be either manufactured on Mars, a process requiring years of infrastructure, development, or transported from Earth, which compounds the mass and cost of the initial mission. The spacecraft must be larger, more robust, capable of surviving the journey in both directions. Life support systems must be doubled, tripled even, to account for the extended duration. Every kilogram of fuel needed for the return journey must itself be lifted from Earth at enormous cost, creating a cascade of expenses that spiral upward with ruthless mathematical precision. And then there is the waiting. A return window from Mars only opens once every 26 months, when the orbital mechanics align favorably between the two planets. This means anyone planning to return must either wait years on Mars, consuming resources, or attempt a longer, more fuel-intensive trajectory. Both options are prohibitively expensive. Both push the mission into the realm of economic impossibility for all but the most determined efforts. As the years pass and the first colonies take root in Martian soil, mission planners face an impossible choice. Resources are finite, even when measured in billions of dollars. Every kilogram of payload sent to Mars must be justified, prioritized, and weighed against alternatives. And here, in the cold calculus of survival and expansion, the mathematics become brutal. The question is not whether return missions are possible, it is whether they are worth it. Imagine the decision before mission control. They have secured funding for a single launch window. The spacecraft has capacity for 50 metric tons of cargo. Option 1. Equip and launch a return vehicle capable of bringing 10 colonists home. The cost, $30 billion. The result, 10 people return to a planet their bodies can no longer tolerate, facing years of painful rehabilitation, likely permanent disability, and uncertain futures. Option 2. Send supplies, equipment, and infrastructure to support 100 new colonists, expanding the base, increasing food production, building medical facilities, and advancing the timeline for self-sufficiency. The cost, $8 billion. The result, a thriving settlement, growing toward the dream of a permanent human presence on another world. The choice, when framed this way, is not really a choice at all. Every resource allocated to return missions is a resource stolen from the future of Mars itself. Every ton of fuel manufactured for escape is a ton not used for exploration, construction, or survival. The settlement priority is absolute. Mars colonies will always need more than they have. More water recyclers, more greenhouse panels, more medical equipment, more radiation shielding, more spare parts. The list is endless. Against this backdrop of constant need, return missions become not just expensive, but ethically indefensible. Then there is the question of insurance and liability, a labyrinth of legal complications that makes return missions commercially unfeasible before they even begin. No insurance company will underwrite a return voyage from Mars. The risks are too high, too novel, too far beyond the scope of actuarial tables built on terrestrial experience. What happens when a return spacecraft fails? Who is liable for the deaths of the crew? The launching nation? The private corporation that built the ship? The insurance consortium that sold the policy? These questions have no clear answers, and in the absence of answers, there is no market. Private corporations, the engines of Mars colonization, require predictable risk profiles. They need to know their exposure to quantify their liability. A return mission offers no such certainty. It is a black box of unknowns, a financial event horizon where money disappears without guarantees. And so, the policies are never written. The contracts are never signed. Return missions remain trapped in the realm of speculation, forever postponed by the mundane machinery of corporate law and risk management. But perhaps the most compelling economic argument against return missions is rooted in simple ethical mathematics. Space agencies and corporations alike must ask, what is the moral weight of a return trip? 10 people wish to come home. They are suffering, perhaps. They are homesick, certainly. But they volunteered for this. They knew, or should have known, the risks. Meanwhile, on Mars, there are 1,000 colonists who did not volunteer to be abandoned. They need supplies, support, and reinforcements. Every launch from Earth is a lifeline, not just to individuals, but to the entire fragile network of human survival on another world. The ethical calculation is stark. Prioritize the few who wish to leave, or the many who wish to live. Resources spent on nostalgia are resources stolen from survival. This is not cruelty. It is the mathematics of existence on a frontier where every decision is a matter of life and death. And in that arithmetic, return missions lose every time. Government space agencies, once focused on missions of exploration and return, are quietly shifting their priorities. The era of sample return missions, of brief visits and triumphant homecomings, is giving way to a new philosophy: permanent colonization. NASA, ESA, and other agencies now speak openly of Mars as a destination, not a waypoint. Their long-term plans emphasize sustainability, in situ resource utilization, and the establishment of self-sufficient colonies. Return missions are mentioned rarely, and when they are, it is in the conditional tense. If resources allow, should the need arise, in the event of emergency. These are the polite euphemisms of abandonment. The reasoning is sound. Human presence on Mars is not a stunt, it is a civilizational investment. It represents the survival of humanity beyond a single planet, the diversification of our species against existential risks. A return mission serves only the individual. A permanent colony serves the species. When governments spend taxpayer money, they must justify the expenditure in terms of collective benefit. And in that framework, return missions cannot compete. Corporations investing trillions in Mars infrastructure face their own version of this calculation. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and future ventures yet unnamed are building the economic scaffolding for interplanetary commerce. They envision mines, factories, research stations, and eventually cities. These investments require labor, skilled labor, engineers, geologists, doctors, technicians, workers who understand the systems, who have adapted to the environment, who have learned to live and thrive in low gravity and thin atmosphere. To these corporations, a worker who wants to return is not a customer. They are a loss. Training a Mars colonist takes years and costs millions. Their expertise is Martian, specialized, irreplaceable in that context. Bringing them home is not just expensive, it is economically irrational. It is importing scarcity where abundance is needed. The corporations will not fund return missions because their entire business model depends on people staying. Contracts will be written, incentives structured, compensation backloaded. The message will be clear, even if unspoken. Your value is here, on Mars, not back on Earth. And then, quietly, inevitably, the politics will shift. As colonies grow, as generations are born on Mars who have never breathed Earth's air, a new identity will form. Martian identity. These people will not see themselves as displaced Earthlings, but as natives of a new world. Independence movements will stir. Sovereignty claims will be made. Mars will begin to see Earth not as home, but as a distant, increasingly irrelevant authority. When that day comes, return missions will not just be economically unfeasible, they will be politically undesirable. A Martian government, should one emerge, will have no interest in funding escapes to Earth. Such missions drain resources and talent from Mars itself. They represent a retreat from Martian identity, a rejection of the Martian project. In time, returning to Earth may not just be unaffordable, it may be forbidden, not by Earth, but by Mars itself. The economic and logistical reality is a cage as real as any made of bone or muscle. It is built from spreadsheets and balance sheets, from insurance premiums and corporate charters. It is a prison constructed by the simple, undeniable truth that Mars needs you more than Earth does. And in the end, need is the currency that matters most. As we drift through these calculations, we realized that the one-way journey was never a failure of planning. It was the plan itself. The absence of a return ticket was not an oversight, but a feature, a necessary condition for the economics of Mars to function at all. You will not return because the cost is too high, the priorities are elsewhere, and the future demands your presence on Mars, not your nostalgia for Earth. The numbers, cold and unyielding, have spoken, and their verdict is final. As we reach the end of this journey, we must confront the truth that has been unfolding with each passing section. The bones that weaken beyond repair, the heart that forgets Earth's gravity, the DNA rewritten by cosmic radiation, the brain that rewires itself to perceive Mars as home, the economics that make return missions impossibly expensive, the psychology that transforms Earth into an alien memory. These are not obstacles waiting to be overcome by future technology. They are realities. Permanent, irreversible, final. Anyone who sets foot on Mars will never truly come back. Not physically, not mentally, not economically. The person who lands on Mars will not be the person who might attempt to return. They will be transformed, remade, evolved into something that belongs not to two worlds, but to one. Mars will claim them, cell by cell, thought by thought, until the very idea of return becomes not just impractical, but unthinkable. And yet, there is something profoundly beautiful in this permanence. For all of human history, exploration has been tied to return. Sailors crossed oceans knowing they could sail home. Astronauts orbited the moon, knowing their trajectory would bring them back to familiar blue skies. Even the longest journeys were round trips, stories meant to be told around fires back home. But Mars demands something different. Mars demands commitment of a kind humanity has never known. It asks us to walk forward without looking back, to plant roots in alien soil and accept that we are no longer visitors. We are residents. We are Martians. This is not tragedy. It is transformation. Perhaps accepting permanence is precisely what will unlock Mars's true potential. When we remove the safety net of return, when we acknowledge that there is no rescue mission coming, no ticket home waiting, then we must build Mars not as a research station, but as a home. We must create systems that sustain not just years, but generations. We must think not in terms of missions, but in terms of civilizations. The first child born on Mars will never walk on Earth. Their bones will form in 1/3 gravity. Their muscles will develop for Martian terrain. Their eyes will see 2 small moons instead of 1 large companion. They will be human, but they will be something more, something new. A branch of humanity diverging in real time, shaped not by millions of years of evolution, but by the deliberate choice of their parents to stay. This raises the ultimate question, one that echoes across the rust-colored valleys and ancient riverbeds of Mars. Is leaving Earth behind forever the ultimate expression of human courage, or is it folly? Is it our greatest adventure, or our most profound mistake? The answer, perhaps, is that it is both, and perhaps that is precisely what makes it so human. To go to Mars is to accept that you will become a ghost to everyone you left behind. Your friends will age. Your family will gather without you. Seasons will change on a world you can never touch again. But in exchange, you will witness sunrises that no human has ever seen. You will breathe air you helped create. You will walk on ground that remembers the universe's beginning. You will not be an explorer returning with stories. You will be a pioneer creating them. Before we part ways in this journey through the permanence of Mars, I'd like to invite you to join this community of cosmic thinkers. If this exploration has sparked something in your mind, if it has made you see Mars or Earth or humanity in a new light, leave a like on this video. Tell me in the comments where in the world, or perhaps someday beyond it, you're listening from. And if you're ready to continue exploring the universe together, subscribe and let these stories guide you gently into sleep, into dreams, into the vast unknown. The first humans to settle Mars will not be remembered as those who went and returned. They will be remembered as those who went and stayed, as those who looked at the impossible distance, the irreversible changes, the permanent goodbye, and said yes anyway. They will not return with stories of Mars. They will become the story of Mars itself.